Hey everybody, welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. We have a special guest in studio with us. I've interviewed this young lady on my Young Turk show, The Aggressive Progressives. I'm excited to have her here. She's a progressive running for Congress in Nevada's 4th District. She's a businesswoman turned Medicare for All activist. After a sad story, her daughter Shailene died at the hands of our nation's profit-driven healthcare system, and she will never stop fighting for the people. She's here for us right now. Let's welcome Amy Vilela. Thank you, Amy, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So you told me your story before about how you became a Medicare for All activist. Please tell our audience at the Jimmy Dore Show about that. How did that happen? Tell us a story about your daughter.
Yeah, so my daughter Shailene was 22 years old. She was going to school to be an RN, and she was a CNA. She decided to move out to Las Vegas to be with our family, and she drove from Kansas City, where she was living, to move in with us in Las Vegas. And when she arrived, she came with like a swollen red leg, and she was saying, something's wrong with my leg, and, with all my background in medicine as an accountant, I told her, Shailene will probably just take care of itself. And I was out of town on business, and I got a phone call from her, and she was crying and screaming out in pain. She presented to a local ER, and the first thing I asked her was, "Do you have insurance?" And my daughter, unfortunately, replied no. And they had my husband calling up TRICARE, which is military insurance, trying to get her covered. And one of the reasons they gave her she couldn't qualify was that she was between the ages of 21 and 23, and school hadn't started yet. So because she had just enrolled.
And if school had started, she would have been covered.
Yes. And they called me. I was out of town on business. And I'm like, why are you calling me for this? I'll worry about the money later. Just get her seen. The next call I got was when she was in the back. And she had, argued with the receptionist, and because the receptionist was telling her, it's going to be very expensive. There's the door. You can leave now. And Shailene was like, no, something's really wrong with my leg. She was crying in pain. When she called me the second time, she started crying on the phone with me again. And I'm being pulled out of meetings, and I'm kind of like, what's going on, Shailene? And she's, Mommy, they're not helping me. And I kind of got frustrated. I'm like, well, you must not be telling them what you need. And so she's telling them right there and then, I need an MRI. I need something for my leg. Something's really wrong with it, beyond just an x-ray. And they told her, go get insurance and see a specialist. We're not a doctor's office. And they didn't even give her a Tylenol for an 8 out of 10 pain. And they pretty much pushed her out of the emergency room. Unfortunately, my daughter had a blood clot. She had every sign and symptom of a blood clot. She was African American with sickle cell trait. She had just driven a long distance. These are things that any typical, medical provider, when they would hear those symptoms and risk factors, would have had to rule out a blood clot. The next time, Shailene got on the plane to go back to Kansas City, and I got a call from her father in a voice I'd never have heard him in, and he was telling me she had coded. And it took me a minute to even comprehend that in my head. I'm like, no, she's 22. No, she must be having a panic attack. It's like, Amy, she's coding. And he's crying, and he's like, I don't know what's going on. They've got her back. I don't know, Amy. I don't know. And I got on a plane, and when I walked in, I realized how bad it was. I saw my daughter intubated. The room smelled of blood, and her eyes would flutter open as she was overbreathing her ventilator to begin with. And I just remember every time she opened them, I would just be like, Shailene, fight this baby, fight. She was also an organ donor, so the time came that we had to turn off the machines. Her organs were too badly damaged, so they still were able to harness her heart valves and her bones and things of that sort. So I always tell that because I want people to be open to being organ donors, and it's a hard decision. But, I remember her father and I looking at each other like, do we have to do it now? And it's like, it's time. And she died in my arms from a pulmonary embolism. A bedside ultrasound would have saved her life. And at that moment, that was the most transformational moment in my life. And I remember, I knew at that point something was up. My sister was an RN. And I knew at that point that she was telling me, Amy, they should have caught this. What do you mean they told her to go home? And right before Shalyn passed away, I whispered in her ear, "You will not have died in vain. I will make sure you are not just a number." And just told her how much I loved her. But nobody should have to go through losing a loved one for something that is totally preventable in this country or anywhere. But especially in a country that is one of the wealthiest countries, if not the wealthiest countries in the world. And that's what got me started and activated. It took about a year and a half. I sat in my room. I didn't want to live. I didn't even want to be in this country for a while. I just told myself, how can I be living here with this happening? This is not the America that I grew up knowing existed or believed that's the way that we acted towards each other as Americans. And then I met Nina Turner at a single payer conference, and she was one of the people that really urged me to fight. And at that time, it was just fighting for the cause of Medicare for all.
Oh, okay. And so that's what got you going. Wow. So that's a really heartbreaking and compelling story. And it's just amazing to me that even with stories like this that are plentiful in the United States, we still have corporate Democrats who will tell you no. Like people here in California, my Senator Dianne Feinstein pretends she doesn't understand that Medicare for all is not a government takeover of healthcare. She pretends she does a right-wing talking point and says that she's not for it because Medicare for all is a takeover of government. Is Medicare for all a takeover of government, Amy?
No, not at all. I get a lot of pushback from the people that are running against me as well. And they specifically try to message against my stand on Medicare for all.
Really?
They use the messaging that it will hurt veterans and military families.
What the F? Are you kidding me?
No, I'm serious.
Does anyone fall for that?
Well, yes, a lot of the veterans.
A lot of veterans do?
The communities, unfortunately. And as I stated, my husband's in the military, will be retiring. Right. I have skin in that game as well. And we're on TRICARE.
Uh-huh.
TRICARE would be very similar to it's a single payer system, right?
Of course. So you have single payer now, and somehow they're afraid to have another single payer. So the government provides health care for the military, and then they're afraid to have the government pay for them. That's all it is. By the way, the government doesn't administer the health care. The government pays the private doctor to administer the health care.
Right.
That's how Medicare for all works.
Right. It's even less than what TRICARE is.
Right. It's less government interference.
Right.
Yes.
The talking angle, though, is that because the bills say that at some point in the future, they'll look at the VA to see if it makes sense to include it in the Medicare for all, that is a no deal for them. I happen to believe that we can keep the VA separate. We need to fund it appropriately. To me, I'd be going against the Democrats and Republicans who are not funding it or voting to have it funded appropriately. I do realize that there are certain things that military veterans and members need to have addressed that might be different than the general population. But that doesn't make it a no deal. We can't sacrifice 35,000 people a year dying.
Right.
Because we might look at this down the line. Well, then elect someone who will make sure that we're protecting the VA and that we're also getting health care for people who so desperately need it. It isn't just people dying. Yes, there's 35,000. And I always tell people, think about that for a minute. I mean, that is a real number to me. That is 35,000 times the amount of pain that I and my family have felt. This isn't just a number.
Right.
But in addition to that, we have people navigating serious illnesses that have to go set up GoFundMe accounts or can't afford the medications and are suffering every day. So it's just not people who are dying. We have to think about all the other people also as well that are trying to navigate a system that's specifically profit-driven.
So, you're going to have to fight your own party, even though people are now giving lip service to Bernie's Medicare for All bill. When the rubber meets the road, they will turn their back on it. I guarantee you that. So, are you prepared? How is the how's the DCCC welcoming your candidacy? Because the incumbent had to drop out because of sexual harassment allegations. Right. So now it's an open seat. And you're the most progressive in the race. Now I'm going to
I would
guess.
argue I'm the only progressive in the
Okay,
race.
yeah, I will argue. So, what has been the response from the DCCC, which is the organization called the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee that's supposed to help Democrats get elected? And what's been happening with that? Anything?
Nothing really to report on. We've been trying to reach out to see where that stands, but we've heard nothing. Right now, there are two individuals in that I could see possibly being backed by the D-TRIP, but we're not sure what they're going to do. I would think that if the Democratic Party was really looking at this strategically, if they want to keep that seat blue, I'm really the only candidate that's going to be able to do that. We have had a mass exit from the Democratic Party. We have had a lot of problems within the Democratic Party within Nevada. A lot of issues have arisen, and I'm really sticking to the issues, and I think that's the only way. People are fed up with politics. They're fed up with parties. They're fed up with the status quo, and in order for us to move forward, we have to elect somebody who is going to be talking about the issues, being unapologetically progressive in what they're messaging and following through and not being bought out by large donors and corporations.
I like the unapologetic part. That's nice because that seems like all the Democrats just apologize and then everybody has to do mental gymnastics to decide why it was a good idea that they didn't stand up for their base again. That's what keeps happening over and over, right? And the Democrats are even able to convince their constituents that them selling out and caving in, like over to DACA, is somehow a good thing because Trump will veto it. I guess then we just have no power. We can never stand up to anybody. But so there's now, like you just mentioned, now there's two other. Would you call them corporate Democrats that have entered the race?
I would say from who their donors are, that would definitely, they would fit that description.
So you're not taking corporate donations?
No, not at all.
Oh, but they are?
They're taking it from the banks, from
Really?
telecommunications,
Oh,
hospitals,
no good.
the military-industrial complex.
Really?
You know, they're donors in their previous. They haven't filed for this, yet because they just came out when the opportunity afforded themselves for own personal advancement to jump in the race. But so they haven't filed the FSC reports, but they both have been in office. They're both career politicians. One was a career politician turned lobbyist. So we have their track record as far as what they've done previously.
So now let me also ask you, are people in Nevada's 4th District, are they concerned about Russia hacking our election, or are they worried about Medicare for all, good jobs, and free
I think
college?
it's a mixture. And what I always try to tell people is, when I speak to them, is that we really have to concentrate on the issues that are happening to Americans right now. If there are other issues that they feel are out there right now, what's happening to the American people really, in my opinion, trumps all of that. We need to, so to speak. I just use that trumps.
You see Trump as the problem or a symptom of a larger problem?
He's definitely the symptom of a larger problem. I am more concerned with what we have in our House and in our Senate. They are the ones that are making these laws. They are the ones that are doing the massive damage. Trump has his own damage that he's putting out, but really it is, in my opinion, because we have had leaders and our representatives who have not been really educating the public on the issues as they should. They have not been messaging what's really happening in Washington, D.C., and a lot of them have been corrupted. And so therefore, there's been a lot of disinformation going out.
Correct.
So I think part of a job of a representative is to constantly be messaging on the issues and how it affects everyday life of the 99%, and making sure that you're building coalitions and moving forward. To resist is not just enough.
Right.
Status quo is no longer enough. We have to not only be resisting, we have to be fighting for more. And that's the real difference that I see in what my platform stands for. I do know that it's not going to happen in the first year or two, but you should be electing people who are going to go into Congress and be messaging and forming those coalitions and making those, being part of, like, starting those movements so that we do get more equitable society going forward.
So I just... we have a lot of progressive candidates come on the show, and we just had Randy Bryce, who's the Iron Stash, on the show, and I asked him, how can we've heard tough talk from Democrats before. Barack Obama said he was going to put on a soft shoe, and stand with union workers on a picket line. And of course, when push came to shove, he ignored them and didn't do a thing to help unions. So are you going to help unions, and why should we believe you?
I will definitely help unions. Most my father and my grandfather were lifelong union iron workers. And also, being in the profession I've been in, I do see the pitfalls of workers not having the right to organize. When you have companies that are for profit and profit driven, you also need to have a voice for the workers. And in this country, we've really gone away from workers' rights, which really isn't to our best interest.
Right.
I mean, if you look at a country like Germany, where they actually have workers on their board.
Right.
They actually have, more profitable industries. They still have manufacturing. They still have a lot of things that we don't have here hardly in the United States anymore. And they have a strong working class. Our working class is disappearing, and that really started with the Reagan administration, right? When he started eroding away union workers' rights and undermining their power. And as we've seen, GDP is still going up, but then we also have the salaries going down. It is not in our best interest, the working class, to not have organized, unions.
Right. Well, I agree. I just hope that Democrats someday, at some point, stick up for unions.
Yeah. Well, what stops people, you have to think about this. You can't be pro-corporations and be taking money from large corporations who are anti-union.
Right.
And then also be pro-union.
I know.
So it all comes down to money. And when you were asking me why you can count that I wouldn't do that, when I look at all the factors that affected my daughter's death, be it lack of insurance, institutional racism, there were many things that affected my daughter's death. But the number one thing was that she was entering into a profit-driven healthcare system. And how do they gain control? It's by pouring money into politics, politicians. They don't donate money without wanting an ROI, return on investment. If I was to participate in that, I am participating in the very things that played a part in my daughter's death. And that will happen over my dead body.
Okay. Well, it's been great having you here. Is there any message you want to leave with people? I mean, I think people got a good sense of you. They know you're a real deal progressive. And, you're for all the things. We've talked to you before, so I know you're for free college to state universities, correct? You're for Medicare for all. Of course, we know that. Are you for ending the wars and investing that money back here in a real jobs program?
Definitely. Not only ending the wars, but also if they are finding it necessary to send our men and women into war, they should be equally interested in making sure they're taking care of them when they come home. Yeah. There is a lot. We've lost our interest in diplomacy and doing diplomacy first, and that's so very important.
Yes. Are you going to have to fight your own party on that? We have two parties, two war parties. We have two management parties. And that's why we need progressives, so we can at least have one party who's an opposition party. The Democrats are no longer an opposition party. They're bragging right now that they're going to fund the wall. They're bragging that they gave $140 extra billion for the military. They're bragging about all the wrong things. And then when they attack Trump, they attack him from the right by complaining he's not being muscular enough in his military response to Russia, which is that you're attacking him from the wrong side.
Right.
So we really need to. There's no left in America is the problem, right? MSNBC is not left, and neither is the Democratic Party. So hopefully, I've lost faith in the Democratic Party, but hopefully people like you can restore it. So
it takes all of us. We need help, and right now my campaign is viable. But I need the progressive community support. So they've told us that no progressive, candidacy can win. If you're not taking corporate donations, you're not going to win. You're just not viable. We are showing viability. We've had over 4,000 individual donations.
That's a lot.
In just one quarter. And but we definitely need help. I'm going against some really heavy hitters. And so anything the progressive community can do, we need their donations, their time. This is important going forward. We have to have that support of the community, and we have to prove to them that their large donors will no longer be calling the shots, that we are coming strong. So if people want to donate, you can go to amy4thepeople.com. We could use all the help we can get. amy4thepeople.com. We'll put a link right underneath here. And if you're a progressive, you want to volunteer or donate, whatever,
That's a real deal progressive. So thank you, Amy.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. And but just real quickly, how are the people of the 4th District receiving you? Pretty well?
Yes, we're really getting out into the community. We've had a lot of people even entering again just because of
So they can
my
vote for you?
candidacy. Yes,
That's a
people
good thing.
can see authenticity.
Okay.
And I'm really glad that they're seeing that and we're having connections. People are ready. They're
Yeah, I
done
know.
with the status quo. I mean, those days are over.
Yeah.
And I think that the progressives all over this country have a real fighting chance going forward.
Okay. Amy Vilela, Nevada's 4th District, real progressive. There's a link to her website. Thanks for your support.